my goodness. You guys, this is truly a gift sent from Odin himself in all of his wisdom. As some of you may have heard, anti-Semitic violence is on the rise in the United States. Why, Trump himself even condemned it in his address to Congress.
Recent threats targeting Jewish community centers and vandalism of Jewish cemeteries, as well as last week's shooting in Kansas City, remind us that while we may be a nation divided on policies, we are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil in all of its very ugly forms.
Clearly, these threats against Jewish community centers and the desecration of Jewish tombstones is an undeniable bit of evidence and irrefutable proof that there is a resurgence of Nazism in the United States. Clearly, now that Trump, the rampant Zionist and anti-Semite, with a Jewish daughter, is president, now that he's in there, all the secret neo-Nazis are feeling validated enough to come out from under the rocks they've been hiding under and paint backward swastikas and evil Nazi markings on the road, as well as go out and place these threatening calls to Jewish community centers and destroy all these tombstones. Obviously, of course, this is all Trump's fault for encouraging neo-Nazism and anti-Semitism through his centrist politics. Except nope. What a fucking surprise we have in store for us today, friends. The story I'm going to cover, which, while is still rather breaking, I would imagine by next week will still either be completely ignored by the mainstream media or will have so much spin as to be unrecognizable. Anyway, let's talk about the case of Juan Thompson, the guy who called in numerous threats against Jewish community centers. Now, knowing what we know about the evil, racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, transphobic, and of course, most of all, anti-Semite Donald Trump, what do you imagine Juan Thompson looks like? Ignore the name Juan. Are you picturing a white skinhead with a bunch of runic tattoos? If so, nope, this is Juan Thompson. Check out this white supremacist! Oh, but friends, that is not all. Come and join me as I explicate the saga of this man's public professional history, who is as absolutely as fucked up as a human being as he appears to be on the surface level. In 2014, Juan was hired by The Intercept to serve as a journalist. Now, why was Juan hired? If you thought because he has an excellent journalistic history and track record, well, you'd be wrong. If you look at the admissions by The Intercept themselves, Juan was a diversity hire, meaning he was likely not given a place at The Intercept because of his credentials, but rather because the online publication felt that they lacked enough representation. That's their own admission. And oh my goodness, would this ignorant, actually racist, lefty attempted altruism come to bite them squarely in the ass. Juan's first big scoop was regarding the Dylann Roof case, an incident where a young white man massacred 9 black people in an historically black church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. Look, to anyone who might have some quandary about me being a racist or sexist or whatever still because I'm on the right, I think I've made it clear, but I will always restate this. I despise all forms of violence. I am a pansy, limp-wristed pacifist by my own admission, not because I think you're not allowed to be violent if you're attacked first, but because I think that initiating in violence is pretty much always wrong. I don't even like talking about subjects like this because they upset me on a very emotional level. I hate violence. I abhor it, and I believe all human life is of indescribable value, even if it's someone you find repulsive, even if it's a piece of fucking shit. I unfortunately think they deserve life. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm against the death penalty, but I find violence abhorrent. Now, that might be a very faggy, liberal opinion for me to hold, but that is how I feel. That being said, Dylann Roof is an irredeemable piece of shit, and what he did to innocents is beyond the pale of my capacity to even properly condemn. All that aside, he is not indicative of some sort of massive anti-black racist movement in the United States. He is a fucked up human being, and before you make this argument of, oh, look, it's a white person saying that only mentally fucked up white people commit crime. No. Juan Thompson is also a fucked up human being who I don't think is representative of all blacks. Some people can just be screwed up in the head. Some people have problems. Some people are just evil. Some people are just bad. And that's what this video is about. It's about Juan Thompson, how he's a bad person. It doesn't have anything to do with black communities, with black people in general. It's just like Dylann Roof. You cannot blame an entire community for the acts of an individual. But it is funny when you claim that the only people who can be anti-Semitic or or responsible for these anti-Semitic crimes are actual neo-Nazis, and now we find, yes, it's a black man who called all this shit in. Anyway, back to Juan. So as I said, while working for The Intercept, Juan covered the Dylan Roof massacre case. Thompson wrote an article where he reached out to Scott Roof, Dylan's cousin, who claimed that Dylan had begun listening to white power music. By the way, that's a question I have. What the fuck is white power music? Is that like Scandinavian metal? Because I listen to that shit. Oh god, no, I keep digging myself deeper into this white nationalist grave. Damn it. Anyway, Scott Roof claimed that much of Dylan's rage was related to a white woman that Dylan had an interest in, who became involved with a black man. Seems potentially legitimate, right? A white guy becomes radicalized because white men are so unhinged and inherently violent that a girl turning them down in favor of a black man would incentivize him to kill as many black people as possible. Except that at least is not the case, because there is no such person as Scott Roof. That character was completely invented by Juan Thompson. That may have been the first of Thompson's big scoops, but it was certainly not the last. He also wrote this article called No Justice, No Respect, Why the Ferguson Riots Were Justified. In this article, he interviews Ferguson native Deshaun Woods, who said, regarding the African American community in the city, quote, "They give the Arabs loans to start businesses and come out here and take our money, but we can't get a penny." Geez, it does sound like maybe there's some discrimination going on. Although, I don't even know if it's politically correct at this point to even say the word Arab. When Thompson asked the mayor of the city if he was sympathetic to the plight of black people and the challenges many of them face in his own town, the mayor responded, quote, "No, absolutely not." In response, Thompson claimed white supremacy was responsible for the violence in the community, and the mayor babbled on, in Thompson's own words, that, quote, "No, a criminal element is the cause of this, rather than white supremacy." Thompson concluded his article by interviewing a man named Michael Brady who witnessed the Michael Brown incident, and who stated with solemnity that he doubted Wilson would be indicted. This all sounds pretty awful, right? Except there is no Deshaun Woods. There is no Michael Brady, and the mayor of Ferguson never spoke to Juan Thompson. Well, obviously, at some point, even as a diversity hire, The Intercept could not allow this asshole to continue to publish complete fiction as fact in their journal. They found that Thompson had used fake email accounts in an attempt to give validity to his stories, as well as just simply fabricating sources with no evidence, and as such, they subsequently fired him. Almost all of his reports he made as a writer for The Intercept now contain a preface noting that the articles are genuinely untrustworthy. Let's take a look here. See, we'll get to some of these articles later, actually, in particular. Did Thompson take his disgraceful termination with dignity and admit his own fault? Absolutely not. He instead wrote this article for Medium where he complains for an excessively long period of time that the only reason for his termination was, take a guess. Did you guess it? Yeah, it's because he's black. Oh, and also because capitalism is evil. Yes, the diversity hire claims that after completely making up absolute fiction in his job as a supposed investigative journalist, that his termination was racially motivated. Part of his claim, knowing that we can trust this guy on his word, is that The Intercept sent him emails, which he doesn't provide, claiming, "We own you," upon his termination, as well as his righteous indignation that no white man will ever own him. Additionally, he makes the claim that The Intercept published his own lies, or in his version, his own unprovable claims, against his will. Again, there's no proof of this given, none. Ultimately, his claim is that he didn't do nothing, and Whitey set him up to both give him a job and then take it away from him, because white patriarchy hegemony that's set up to both raise up blacks and systematically strike them down just to keep the black man down in the dirt, regardless of their own work, efforts, or accomplishments, of which he has so many. His only admission of personal responsibility is this quote in this entire article. It's this quote: "Yes, at times I was sloppy." Finally, he ends the article with his goal, and this is it: the destruction of the capitalist racial supremacy. Holy fucking shit, you can't make this up if you tried. Now some of you, hopefully none of you, but maybe some of you, may be asking, Aiden, why does it matter that this guy made up some news stories? He was just an innocent black man trying to get ahead in the competitive journalist business, and he needed a big scoop. Well, if there is anyone in my audience who thinks that, let me be perfectly clear why this is so fucked. First of all, there is an anticipation from the public that journalists have a level of credibility. Oh, but this poor black man, he clearly can't be held to the same standards as whitey because of racism, institutional racism, am I right? Yeah, well, look what this fucker accomplished by the virtue of bold-faced lying when he was given a grand opportunity to perform as a real investigative journalist. That's right, the New York Daily News, the New York Post, New York Magazine, the Toronto Sun, Alternet, The Root, Radar Online, Latin Post, Centric TC, and even United Kingdom outlets including Indie, the Daily Mail, and the Mirror at a minimum, we don't know how many there are, at least based on this report, at a minimum, reported on Thompson's Scott Roof report as fact. That's because that presumption of having integrity is not just apparent and evident amongst the public, but also very much so in the journalistic field of professional journalists. There is an expectation of honest and researched reporting. As such, the concept that a guy could just bold-faced lie about his sources, it's an extreme taboo. It's a big no-no. Despite all of Thompson's claims of white supremacy and capitalism as the reason for his termination, he was terminated for lying. That's a fact. Yeah, and a real fact, Juan, not one I pulled out of my ass. At this point, you might be wondering why I started talking about all this anti-Semitic hate speech carried out against Jewish community centers and this seemingly unrelated, corrupt, asshole-ish black man. Well, dear viewer, let me tell you why the fresh hell I'm talking about Juan Thompson. I'm talking about him because he was detained by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the crime of making violent threats against Jewish community centers. Let's from now on just call them JCCs, that's easier. He made these threats in the name of one of his ex-girlfriends who he had been stalking potentially for years. Yes, he made threats to JCCs in her name in order to get her in trouble. Yep. Is it really surprising that once an asshole, always an asshole? There's a couple of reasons I want to talk about this whole concept and this whole issue though. First of all, the leftist media would not shut the fuck up calling Trump an anti-Semite, totally ignoring the fact that he's a Zionist and the greatest supporter of Israel in the world as far as political leaders go. Yeah, I know. What a Jew hater. How does he control himself from shouting 1488 and breaking Netanyahu's wrist every time he touches his dirty Jew hand? Let's take a listen to some of these folks shit-talk Trump for being an anti-Semite, despite that he's the only world leader who supports Israel outside of itself.
Look, when you don't acknowledge the things that are going on and decry it, some people might, even if you don't mean to, might misinterpret that as
tacit approval.
Tacit approval, and even if it's not approval, that it's not a big issue, it's not a big deal, and you begin to normalize it. And he ended that statement by saying, intentional or not, this emboldens anti-Semites. So now, look, the only defense of Trump in this case is that he has incredibly low IQ. He's a child, so maybe he doesn't understand those concepts.
Interesting. Now Trump had the absolute audacity to suggest that while some anti-Semitic hate crime is certainly real, it was also possible that some of these hate crimes were false flags. Do you know who, in particular, picked up this topic by suggesting that, if not Trump himself, then his allies are a bunch of Jew-hating bigots who desecrate cemeteries and call in bomb threats? Why, it's The Intercept, with their article, Trump can't accept that his allies are targeting Jews, so he blames his opponents. Interesting Intercept. Yes, very interesting, because it turns out at least quite a few of the calls made to these Jewish community centers were placed by your former black diversity hire. That's pretty neat, isn't it? As further evidence of just what a lovely human being Juan Thompson is, and how he's totally not related or involved to any political movements or ideologies that might have spurred this, let's look at his Twitter and see some of his other writings. Let's see, on the 19th of January, he accused 42% of Americans for being fascists for having favorable opinions towards Trump. See, and to all the commies who've been raiding my channel, this is why everyone thinks you're ridiculous. Because you seem like Juan Thompson. Everyone I don't like is a fascist, Nazi, white supremacist, whee! Oh, but friends, it gets better from there. On the 26th of February, he made this tweet decrying the destruction of Jewish graves, an understandable concern, but one which is quite repulsive in the context of this situation. Here he is on the 27th, he makes a tweet crying about the plight of Jews for the hate crimes being committed against children regarding these bomb threats to JCCs. Yeah, probably about an hour after he made a bomb threat to one of those JCCs himself. This communist, this is why we think you're laughable. This guy is an admitted communist, by the way, I'm making that very clear. Here he is asking for a lawyer to fight against a racist, nasty white girl for supposedly using his name in a bomb threat. Ironically, that is exactly what he did with that girl's name to the JCCs. Although there is zero evidence and zero information that there is anything behind his contradictory claim. Also, look at this. This is part of the FBI report where he, in addition to calling the JCCs, reported his ex-girlfriend to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children to expose her as a pedophile. What an absolute piece of human waste. Additionally, in November of 2016, Juan claimed he was reverting to Islam. A coincidence? Perhaps. Well, I mean, we know he was already a piece of shit since at least 2014, so I doubt Islam had much to do with his general garbage character. But I'm sure it encouraged him to hate Whitey even more. And of course, the liberal he didn't do nothing brigade is already out strong, with this cuck claiming that it doesn't matter if he made all these calls because his offenses are only about 10% of the recent supposed hate crimes. That's nice, Angus. Just write everything off. Did you ever think, you cognitive infant, that if one dude is capable of false flagging 10% of these crimes, that it is not possible for many, if not most of them, to be false flags? This guy's main problem was in being too fucking stupid to use a dynamic IP address when he made these erroneous reports. I mean, Jesus Christ, the rest of us either learned how to use dynamic IP or use a VPN a decade ago. But for many of these crimes, like these horrifying swastikas being painted all over construction sites, why, there's no one to witness them. And why would I not be surprised if it turns out that, in fact, instead of a bunch of neo-Nazi skinhead white nationalists, that the people destroying Jewish graves are in fact Muslims? Because if you have not got the memo, folks, Muslims hate Jews. Anyway, as such, either way, there's no witnesses to most of these things. And as a part of that, we can never locate the card-carrying neo-Nazi fascists who painted these signs and who desecrated these graves. You know what the obvious solution is then, comrade? Why, it's to punch absolutely everyone who isn't wearing their trusty hammer and sickle armband. And you gotta wear your armband, or else how will we know who the real Nazis are? Look, I think this guy is a waste of air. And honestly, I hope he goes away for a long fucking time. He clearly has no concept of integrity, no concept of morality, no concept of justice. He's a communist. Sorry, by the way, if I'm going hard on commies, they do deserve it. But I am both enjoying and getting irritated by them raiding my channel. More so, irritated because guess what, folks? For a long time, I actually considered myself to be an anarcho-communist, and my faggy pacifist ideals have never altered, not throughout all of it. So when I have self-proclaimed commies telling me that my day of the rope is near, homie, shut the fuck up and gas yourself, or at least spend some time in self-reflection to understand how warped and self-conflicting your ideas are, rather than trying to piss on others. Ugh, sorry for the sad last note. Anyway, what I want to say about this case is, get ready for the media to either totally ignore it, or have a bunch of people come in and say he didn't do nothing. They're already sort of doing it, and then walking back from it. Here we have the SPLC claiming that his reports weren't really anti-Semitic, because he was only doing it to slander his ex-girlfriend. What a good guy! Of course, they've since deleted this tweet, claiming that he's now anti-Semitic regardless of his motivations, so who can tell where this story is going to go. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Aiden Paladin, Altana Volt.